Hi, my name is Z, and I am a security engineer at Dropbox. I am starting a YouTube series showing folks in different careers and how they got to where they are now. And I wanted to start this series because every career has their pros and cons. And I wasn't provided this information starting out. And hopefully, I can shed some light for the other people thinking of changing careers or just starting out. Today, I was really fortunate enough to have Abby, currently a security engineer at Dropbox, to join me to kick off this series. Without further ado, this is Abby. Can you please introduce yourself?
Of course. Um, Hi, everyone. My name is Avi, and I have been in the information security domain for about 7 years now. I have previously worked at Lyft, Facebook, Box, and NCC Group. I finished my master's and started working professionally. So that's been
Oh,
about.
wow. That's that's actually very interesting. You're one of the few folks that I know that have a master's in the security field actually. I was wondering if you can share a little bit more about that and whether or more like how much does it apply to our field actually?
It applies specifically the technical aspect of it applies, but the overall program was catered to a general population. That meant it included things like cybersecurity policies, technical network security, as well as compliance piece, of security. So it gave me a holistic picture of what cybersecurity means from an academic perspective.
Hmm. That that is very interesting, and I find that somewhat relatable, mainly because I've well, for one, I wasn't really a college. Well, that came out wrong. I wasn't really more of a school person. I actually majored in electrical engineering, and honestly, I feel like none of the stuff I learned in school really applied too well to what I'm doing now. And yeah, although I really had fun and I made long lasting connections, but other than that, it really didn't apply. And while we're on that topic, I was wondering if the masters actually played any part of your career growth.
So, one thing that I think you can agree on as well is school teaches you how to learn by yourself. Um, for the curriculum that's out there, you might not be able to attend some classes, or you might have a hard time understanding something in the classes that you attend. And you go out and learn them by yourself. So, learning to learn is also a skill um, that you attain while you're in college. The other thing is it gives you a breadth of information on different aspects that you might not use on day-to-day basis, but it's still helpful to have on back of your head when you're performing your job duties. As an example, we as security professional need to have breadth of knowledge on different aspects of computer science. That could include things like database systems, operating system, data structure and algorithm when you're actually performing coding related tasks. So being knowledgeable of them and being able to pick them up quickly in job is always a plus. And if you have some knowledge of that in the past, it helps you perform your job duties better. That's been my opinion. Do you think it has helped you in indirect ways?
It it did, mainly just because I had to write a lot of reports in school, I guess, and as I do now, I also write a lot of reports from time to time. So somewhat correlates, somewhat, but not too much. But you're right, somewhat. And since since you mentioned that you spent a good amount of time in the industry already, and I was wondering, like, what was your most favorite part in your role, and least favorite part, of course. But
Yeah. To talk about the most favorite part in the domain of information security, it's mostly seeing a lot of really smart, curious, and enthusiastic people around me. For a lot of people, it's not just career, but something that they're really passionate about, even outside their work field. Um, People are smart in that the field is constantly innovating, and obviously, like finding a loophole in a system that's designed to work certain way always requires new and creative ways of thinking. So So that's one of the biggest fascinating aspects of being in this industry. I think same thing. I can explain it in a way that doesn't feel like a plus, especially if you think from perspective of work-life balance, because you are very much siloed into this industry, this domain. Your social media feed is entirely from people who do similar kind of work that you do as well. In the weekends, you're reading up on certain bugs that were found that you find fascinating, and even after job, your job doesn't really leave you, because what if a severe 0 day is found in the fleet that your company currently uses, right? And if you happen to come across it, it is very hard not to jump in and inform the company of the risks that we're exposing ourselves to. And so this one particular aspect of the field always being creative and innovative has its pros and cons. That is what keeps me, that is what um, motivates me to keep working in this field, but also has a slight negative consequences attached to it.
Mm, that that really makes sense. And as for me, actually, my favorite part of my job is actually to interact with everyone across the engineering organization. As an extrovert, kind of rare in this field. No, I'm kidding. As an extrovert, I actually really enjoy meetings. Funny enough, I actually thrive off of meetings sometimes, and mainly when there's a lot of collaboration going on, trying to resolve an error, trying to resolve a bug, or getting towards the best solution at the time. And I really thrive off of working together across multiple teams. And similar to your answer, unfortunately, sometimes the least favorite part is a lot of meetings as well. And those are the meetings that's the less exciting meetings where you have to listen in and you have to sit in and just like provide your opinion, and then you stay quiet for another 20 minutes. Those are less rare, but it happens from time to time. But yeah, actually, since we were mentioning about our role, what are some recommendations you have for folks that want to follow your footsteps and break into this industry?
So for the people who are, let's say, in college and trying to break into information security domain, I would highly encourage them to start doing things outside of college out of passion. That could be things like bug bounties, where you look for security issues in reputed company that have a bug bounty program, and you get rewarded for it. You can, after that, you can start writing them up on your blog. It doesn't have to be bug bounty bugs. Like, you can write about a nifty trick that you figured out using Linux command line. It can be anything along technical lines that shows that you're passionate about this field. And having something outside of college degree really sets you apart in the candidate pool. Beyond that, you can also work on capstone projects that have a real world product or a real world impact. That way, it's easier, for hiring managers, for people in the industry to notice you as somebody who has passion in this particular field. Did you have any suggestions for newcomers?
Yeah, actually, for those in college, I really would recommend them to not pursue their passion, but explore what they're passionate about. And that's really, and and I feel like that's really what college is. Sometimes people go in thinking they want to be X or thinking they want to be Y, but in reality, you really don't know until you work in the industry or work in the field or go out and do an internship. I would highly recommend college kids, or not kids, college folks, to really explore and see if they really enjoy it. Like, sometimes we have this mindset that we don't enjoy it or we're just not good at it. But honestly, I would challenge you to go try it anyways. In college, that's where you can fail and it's okay. And we explored a lot of recommendations for folks in college. What about for folks that are trying to change careers? Do you have any recommendations for them?
So if you work in one of the technical fields already, it's much easier, because in certain capacity, you or someone from your team is probably interacting with security in certain ways. So let's say if you're working as a software engineer, a product manager, a project manager, and all of those roles, there is certain collaboration happening between your team and security. So you can start out by being the person of contact that interacts with security when a new feature is being launched or when you need a specific review. And getting involved with the security team more often lets you see the ins and outs of how they function, what they work on, and you can collaborate on certain specific projects if there ever happens to be one. That's the best organic way to transition in, um, if you are within that sort of domain. Outside of that, it would require the technical skills that we talked about for college folks. So breadth of knowledge in CS domain, and some specific security knowledge is definitely helpful.
That makes sense. And since we mentioned that folks in our field were required to know a huge breadth of knowledge, I feel like it sometimes can bring or trigger imposter syndrome within us, or for folks that aren't even in the field yet, they can feel imposter syndrome. And for those folks, I was wondering if you have any recommendations for them.
That's a good point. Let's see what imposter syndrome is first, right? Like it's the feeling that you don't belong there. And that is something that you say to yourself, that you don't belong there. But there is a reason that your hiring manager, your colleagues thought that you are capable of being in that position, first of all. Second, this syndrome comes in when you are more overwhelmed, or see a lot of impactful work done by other people. And that's the root of that is comparison. So if you're comparing yourself constantly with somebody else whose level expectation you might not already know, that is sort of a irrational fear, or irrational judgment. I think recognizing that is the first step. After that, it's always great if you could bring this up to your immediate management and ask them directly how you are doing, or what you are expected to perform within certain period of time, what level of expectation or impact is expected out of you. So if you have this honest conversation with the management, it's much easier to get rid of this irrational fear, and move on with doing what you're best at. Did you have any imposter syndrome, and how do you deal with it? I'm curious as well.
But before I answer that, I actually really want to agree with you, because you only report to your manager, and honestly, only your manager's opinion should really matter. I mean, yeah, it's nice if your team likes you, but I really think your manager's opinion is worth more. And I'm gonna be honest, I did have imposter syndrome, or I still do actually, but I challenge those that have the syndrome to frame it in a more positive way. And what I mean by that is, when I have imposter syndrome, I feel inferior to those around me. And my question now is, why is that not a good thing? If I'm feeling inferior to, let's say you, which I do, by the way, but on that note, if I do feel inferior, that means I have something to learn from you. And why is that a bad thing? As we are teammates, we learn from each other. Hopefully I learn more from you, but which is probably true. And on that note, right, it means that I have more room to grow. And why is that a bad thing? Yes, it could bring in certain negative stuff. And by negative stuff, I mean like overworking, working harder than usual, working longer hours. And yes, those are bad things. And that could lead to burnout or other negative consequences that I may or may not be going through. We'll leave that for another conversation. But I want to frame it in a positive note where you can bring your career to a new height. Assuming, for me, it's my passion, I will bring my passion to a new height. And that's more of framing what is negative in a positive light. I want to say it's a silver lining.
Agreed. That's a good point, but I don't want my co-workers, or anyone for that matter, any professional for that matter, to be driven from a point of fear. Although you can technically use imposter syndrome to motivate yourself to work, the motivations for me should come from a positive standpoint, from a point where you're looking to grow your career more, as opposed to being fearful if your coworkers work more than you, you're going to get left behind. Although seemingly it will appear that you're working hard and you're working really well, but at the crux of issue, uh, you know at mental level, you are driven out of fear, and that will drain you out over time, and you won't be able to perform at your best. It's just my personal opinion, and I would
Wow.
love to sort that out, before
No,
it gets.
that's really, it's like this is therapy, and that kind of like opened a new thought for me. That's very interesting. I'll think on that some more after this. And yeah, since we're on the topic of burnout, I was very curious on how do you balance work between life? Like, what do you do outside of work? Anything fun? Well, it doesn't have to be fun. Anything else outside of work? Just mainly because I know folks in our field, life outside of work is related to work.
I definitely agree. I've seen a lot of my friends and coworkers um, really interested in the field, that a lot of their time outside of work is consumed by things that are related to information security still. I personally like to do activities that help me be completely engulfed in them, so that I can truly disconnect. That includes things like running. I'm training for a half marathon, and I think that helps me truly disconnect, because when I'm running, I'm just running. It's like my leg hurts, like I'm out of breath, so that just puts me in the moment. Some other things that I do are practice meditation and mindfulness. I go to these yearly retreats that are 10 days long, where you don't keep your cell phones, or do not maintain external communication anyway, neither speak to anyone. That really gives me an opportunity to disconnect. Maybe it's not for everybody, but I'm giving an example of how it works for me. Some other things are hikes in the weekends, getting connected to nature, seeing mountains, waterfalls, and climbing up mountains. It's always rewarding. Also, I like to read books that are not PDF or screen, so that I can avoid them as much as possible when I'm trying to disconnect. So yeah, those are a few things that I do to truly disconnect at times. What about you? I'm curious.
So I actually would like to share something actually. I find it really amazing that you can leave your phone and just like not touch your phone and be completely unplugged for 10 days. I'm gonna be honest, I can't even do it for 8 hours. I'm gonna be honest, I don't have 2 complete REM cycles of sleep sometimes, and you know what I do? Wake up and look at my phone. And that's unfortunate, but that's the truth. And I'm really amazed you could just like leave your phone out for 10 days, and I'm gonna miss hearing a response from you. But all jokes aside, I'm really glad you have such a great routine to unplug, so that when I do find you, hopefully you'll be a lot more refreshed.
I will be making sure to give you, like, before I go there.
Sounds great. I'll be sending pigeons over. Okay, be careful. But and to go a little deeper into that, and you're right, and it goes back to the imposter syndrome a bit. And something I'm trying to do to unplug recently is picking out hobbies outside of what I would do for my day-to-day routine. And that doesn't include working out or just binge watching YouTube or binge watching Netflix. Those are unhealthy, but no, I'm kidding. Those are great, whatever you do have to do to unplug. But what I've been trying to do is actually join YouTube as a content creator. And I really want to take this moment to thank you for supporting me and being on my first podcast, first of all. Thank you again later. But again, thank you for supporting me on this journey to, finding a hobby outside of work, even though we're talking about work. But oh man. So hopefully this is something I'm doing outside of work, and still gotta edit it, film this. It's a whole new learning process, and I'm actually really, really enjoying it a lot. And I get to talk to friends, coworkers outside of a normal work day or a normal just small chat, and I really do enjoy it. And on that thought of work-life balance, I do have a unpopular opinion that I do want to share, and would love to hear your thoughts on that. I feel that work-life balance and burnout is your team lead and your manager's responsibility. And why I say that is because as your team lead, he or she should manage the technical aspect of the project and partially should understand or know that you are overloaded or overwhelmed, or maybe just going through something, or partner up with the manager to know that XYZ is going on and should be provision and should provision the project or divvy up the project accordingly when needed to be. What's your opinion on that?
I personally think that the individual contributor or the person who's working, they know more about their work than managers do. And when you're overwhelmed, you're expected to communicate that up, because everybody being virtual and remote, and having weird work hours, it's very difficult to say who is getting overworked and who's not. So I think it's individuals' responsibility to set that boundaries clearly and set that boundaries with your manager. Beyond that, whenever you overwork yourself, the consequences of that, which includes mental degradation and physical degradation, that takes a toll on you, and you won't be able to perform as well on your career as you could have, and that's all. And that's not good for you as well, and you will bear consequences of those actions, as opposed to your higher level managers or management in general. So I think we should be more vigilant about what our work week looks like or how overwhelmed we are, and appropriately communicate them with management.
That's a refreshing aspect or refreshing view, actually. Never thought of it that way. On a closing note, actually, we vaguely mentioned that you were part of a lot of FANG companies, a couple. I was wondering, for the folks that want to pursue these FANG companies, do you have any tips, tricks, or study guide? Even recommendations, maybe?
So FANG companies, security engineers have a slightly higher bar than other companies for coding and system design kind of questions, which means you should be practicing algorithmic and data structure implementation and coding question using those algorithms and data structures. This means doing a little bit of lead code questions. I personally did about 100 of them when I was interviewing there. And also recommend doing system design practice rounds with your friends with a whiteboard, or just using Google Draw or some other whiteboard software. This really helps to make sure you don't bomb the interview. This is the first step, but obviously it's going to take a long time after you start on these things. And beyond that, like including more of these in your day-to-day job, like coding and system design related work in your day-to-day job, will also help you prep better. The other aspect obviously is very broad, which is fundamentals of computer science and security, intersection of that. So that would include knowing a little bit about database system, knowing a little bit about how a specific vulnerability works, having a broad knowledge of how technologies like SSH works, how Unix file system works, and things like that is also really helpful. So you need to have a breadth of knowledge, but the kind of thing that separates FANG interviews from other interviews is mostly higher bar for coding and system design round. And I would, my tip would be to practice those things more rigorously than when you are preparing for other companies for security engineering roles.
I wish I met you sooner, because I actually didn't know I was at a higher bar. I went in nilly-willy, but as we can tell, probably that's why I failed. But yeah, that's very great. Thank you. I'm pretty sure our viewers will be very thankful as well. Since we're on the topic of interviews, what are something, or not something, but what are stuff that you look for as you interview potential candidates for your team or maybe even your company?
So the first thing that I look for is obviously what the business has asked for, right? And that would include things from the checklist, like do they have experience on this particular area? Do they know about this particular technology and things like that? But beyond that, personally, in general, I like looking at the level of enthusiasm and curiosity that they have. It's not something that you just can get out of them, like how enthusiastic are you about this role, but this reflects on other questions like asking them to talk about their past projects, asking them what excites them about this role, like, and if they can give a clearer answer to these questions, I am much happier to have a coworker who is as enthusiastic as my existing coworkers, and that's always a great feeling. So I think that's one of the things, their enthusiasm and curiosity about the role, about the kind of work that they do. It's something that I look for besides the job requirements.
That makes sense. What I look for is folks that can give me imposter syndrome. But all jokes aside, and that would close up our first episode of this YouTube series. Avi, I really want to thank you for taking the time to join me and answer all of these questions for our viewers out there. And with that, are there any additional things you would like to plug?
So if someone is just starting out and has a very specific questions on how to get started in the field, and specific directions, feel free to send me a message over in LinkedIn. And yeah, thank you so much for inviting me over. This was fun.
And thank you. And I will actually put Abby's LinkedIn information in the description below. And with that, thank you all.
Bye.